I knew my mother loved him dearly, but I also knew she'd never speak about him, so I knew remarkably little about what happened and how he came to die. She died, and in my study, now my one room, there was the old desk that they had, and in the desk were these pile of letters. And I went through the letters, and many of them were, because they were separated an awful lot, A, during the war, and B, leading up to it, because he was a travelling salesman. And there were these unbelievably lovey-dovey letters. They were seriously in love, I can tell you. Then, as I was going through, there was a separate bundle. There was a bundle that was wrapped on its own, slightly differently to the lovey-dovey stuff. And this is what the letter said at the beginning. Dear Olive, if you read this letter, I've been reported killed. I asked Reg, his brother, to send it to you, as there are just a few things that I couldn't put into an ordinary letter. Now, that's a pretty gobsmacking thing when you pick up a letter and read it like that. I showed it to Amanda, their mother, my son Andrew, and we had a few tears. But then we just sort of forgot about it. Life went on, all those things that happened, and so I didn't do much about it. Then I was in London, and so were Amanda and Andrew. Marissa was there, and we'd been there for a conference. And basically, my daughter said, "Dad, do you realise actually it's the 60th anniversary of D-Day in a couple of days?" I said, "No." Said, "Look, why don't we go?" So we decided to go. So Andrew, Amanda, and myself said, "Let's go and find out what happened to my father." So we had to do research. I'm a scientist after all. So we in fact went brilliantly to the Imperial War Museum in London. If you haven't been to that in London, you really should go. It really gives you, well, I suppose one of the highlights is, of what I'm doing, the horror of war. But it's actually very interesting. So we were able to get information from there. So, and while I was there, you can go to a computer and you can plug it all in. And there is Jack Lee. My mother always called him Joe. So I'm never quite sure whether Jack came through, although I know it's on his birth certificate. Anyway, here it is. No grave, but the Bayeux Memorial that you're familiar with. Panel 11, column 1 on the Bayeux Memorial. Well, we knew we had to go there for sure. So, we get on the boat, Sherbrook Express at Portsmouth, which is where they all went, including my father. That is where so many of the ships sailed on that terrible night of June the 6th. And so, you know, it's a fair trip, so we spent a lot of time doing serious research now. I'd actually done photocopies of all the letters. We found this wonderful book called Sword Beach. We knew that it landed in Swords because I'll show you later stuff. We had got some information, and in those letters, as you'll see, there was quite a lot of other information in our chase, which I like to call the footsteps of my father. We had this cute little vehicle. We stayed in Calvados, which is a good place to stay. So at the end of the day, Calvados was there. The first day, well, actually on the way to Calvados, we drove past the Bayeux Memorial. And I suppose this is the beginning when it became quite emotional. This was a long time ago. But anyway, so it was a surprisingly emotional experience. And here we are, panel 11, column 1 of the Bayeux Memorial. There he is, under the captains, Lee J. I had his medals, so I thought, I've got to do this, so I actually did that. Andrew, my son, did a sort of rubbing on paper to get an image of that. And in fact, it was emotional. I think we were virtually crying. But before we start the footsteps, we decided we really should look around and see what Normandy was like and go to the various important spots that we knew about, having done all our reading. And you could not believe what Normandy was like on the 60th anniversary of D-Day. It was full of all these vehicles, you know, jeeps, ambulances, everything under the sun. And they were nearly all Americans. They were nearly all presumably the sons of their father who had been in the war, and they had their toys and they were driving them all around. It was a fantastic feeling, actually. It was very, very positive. And of course, what you have to remember is, as far as Normandy is concerned, we were the liberators. We were generally the liberators. And so there was this terrific thing, English flags everywhere, the local paper, Us France, saying everything in French except for one word on the front, thank you. So that was a good feeling. And then we look at the beaches. You know about the beaches, you know, the Utah and Omaha, the Americans landed, Gold, Juno and Sword, where the Canadians Gold, Juno, and the Brits there, and you'll see later, Sword. So we went to Amarach because that's where they'd actually had the main celebration, and that's Amarach, that's the beach, that's Sword Gold Beach on the actual day. One of the remarkable things was going to the beach. Oh, sorry, I forgot that one. Yes, you may know about Amarach. One of the staggering things is it 2 years to prepare for D-Day. And I knew that because of some of the training that my father had done. And this was the so-called Mulberry Harbour. That concrete, they had been building those concrete blocks for 2 years. It was Churchill's idea. And they built these incredible harbours. So when which were all, after the fleet went on, all the boats coming in the back were tying these bits of concrete, and they built this. There were 2 Mulberry Harbours. One was Amarach. And that was that's Amarach now. And you just look how staggeringly calm it is compared to that before. Now this is where they had the actual celebration on the 6th, on the red dais there. Look at those heavies. Come here. Even Johnny Howard was there. And it was obviously a very big separation. More importantly, on the 7th, there were 2 more important people. That is my son Andrew and my daughter Amanda on the red thing. Then we went on to Juno Beach, where that's where all the Canadians landed and literally got mowed down as they came across the beach. And that's on the Canadian website, and that's Juno. Then, again now, you can still see the same buildings there. I don't have time to talk about Monty. I may mention a little about him later, whether he was a hero or whether his stuffed up thing was partly responsible for my father's death. We'll get there later. But this just gives you a sense of what D-Day was like. 5,333 ships and landing craft, 75,000 troops, British, Canadians ashore, 57,000 Americans, a total of 132,000, of whom 3,400 died, of which my father was present. Again, before we follow the footsteps, you just have to highlight the irony and the horror of the war. There's my mother, and there's my mother with her favourite brother, Douglas. Douglas, absolutely loved him. He was a flyer in the box. He actually was there, lying down with his hand on the bombs as they flew off. And on one mission, it was his 21st mission, they flew to bomb Cologne. This was basically a year before D-Day. You should now receive my telegrams to Dad, deepest sympathy, but you hope he's safe. And then another letter, this was from my father, saying, darling, your letter had just come. I thought I'd write it once. I know it's horrible to see the words missing, presumed, killed, but darling, it doesn't mean necessarily that, imagine that any more definite. After a certain period of time, it's automatic. So at least there's still just as much hope as there is. As you know, I was fonder of Douglas than anyone, Joe. What about Joe? Well, he was born in 1913. He smoked a pipe. He married my mother, Olive Grace Humphreys. And he'd been at a school called Emmanuel School in London, and he'd been in the cadets. He'd been a sort of an under officer in cadets, so he'd done the training. And I think that helped him when in 1939 he enlisted and fairly rapidly went through the training and indeed ended up being a captain. And so you can see him there with the captain's hat on, and this is one of his groups. That was with the Bedfordshire and Hertford Regiment, because we lived in a little village called Ravenston, which is in Bedford, and that's where I was actually born to. Okay, so I've already mentioned that 2 years prior to D-Day, he was in training in many areas. And one of the really weird bits that he didn't really understand was that he was in the Navy at Portsmouth for about a year. And he proudly said to Leonard Mum, he became the first infantry man to be trained as a BLO. We thought that was probably a beach landing officer, and his job was to help the Warwicks, because by this time he was with the 2nd Warwicks, help the Warwicks land. So that's what we thought. He joined the Lieutenant of the Warwicks. As I said, we thought to lead a group in the landing. And good officer was in serious demand prior to D-Day, and so presumably they needed him. He was in charge, well, we sort of knew this, he was in charge of a Bran-gun carrier. This is what a Bran-gun carrier looks like. It's from the Imperial War Museum. It's just such a teeny thing. It's just staggering. But you know, this is what they're sort of driving around trying to kill each other. He was part of the famous 3rd Division under Monty, the 185th Infantry. There they are, the 2nd Battalion Royal Warwicks, and you can see there's a lot of others there too. And here are the beaches again, but this is showing that in fact the 3rd Brigade, the 3rd Division are definitely landing on the Sword. Their task, as I stress in a minute, was to capture Caen. There's a bit of a trap there. Panzer Division, just stuck there. This is Sword then. They were the 3rd lot. They came in about 9:55 a.m. to 11. There was real shambles, incredibly wrecked. A lot of those other vehicles got stuck in the sand and whatever. But clearly they got through because they went on their way. And here's the land. You can see some of the Bran-gun carriers. Who knows, one of those could be my father's. Anyway, they're all at this place just by the sea by 11, and they moved by the D60 toward Caen, because that was their task. That's the task they'd been doing. That's Sword now. The 2 gendarmes were there because Mitterrand was giving a speech just up the road. But again, the sheer peacefulness of it. Okay, so they landed. Here's the beach. The army was up there, along that road there. That was where they were, and that's where they went on June 6th. Coming from Sword, down this road here, down the D68. And they were told to move across a little village called Burnville and Blandville, where there was heavy fighting from people I mentioned in a minute. They dug in there, so almost certainly they actually spent the night of the 6th on the outskirts of Blandville. On June the 7th, they were told to lead the 185th attack with orders to take Lebesia Wood, which is a wood down here. So presumably that's where it happened. And so the 2nd Warwick carriers and anti-tank guns were set down the road and ordered to come up along that road. And they did. And there's the road. So that's the road they came up. That field there is a cornfield, and things happen there. Because that is where, on foot, the 131 infantry walked up there. And for reasons, again, I mentioned they were blown to smithereens, and 154 of them died on that early morning, the morning of the 7th of June. So we were starting to sort of think, you know, we have to work out exactly where it is he died. We knew this had happened. We knew the second warrant carriers and anti-tanks roared up the executive, led by someone I'll mention later, Lieutenant Bannerman. 5 of the carriers were knocked out. Bannerman's managed to get through, but ultimately his was destroyed. And Bannerman and his men, they were all captured. So the battle was here. It wasn't just this Panzer Grenadier Regiment, it was the 21st Panzer Tank Division. That was Rommel's division. They were Rommel's tank. He was in that position because it was Hitler's prize thing and he wanted them there. It was probably a mistake, thank God, but that's where they were. So how do we get a bit more? The letters told us other things and start to give us a picture of what's going on. A letter from Sheila Pike. She was one of those 4 captains of the vehicles that were knocked out. It puzzles me very much as to why he was behind. This is my mother had asked the question, did she know anything about Joe? Why he was behind enemy lines at all. The Germans broadcast only 4 names, and all 4 were working officers. Waterworth, Bannerman, Healy, and of course her husband, Pike. But they're all prisoners, and they're all safe. So she was saying, well, he must be one of them, he must be there. And then there's the letters from Geoffrey Burgess. I was the last to see Joe about 10 o'clock in the morning of the 7th. His battalion were doing an attack. We'd been together at the OP observation point, doing some shooting to support. Joe said he was going to get a better OP. He then went to his truck and joined the advancing infantry. 2 ORs came to see me a few days later and they said they'd seen Joe blazing away with a brain gun from the back of his truck. The enemy fire was terrific. His truck received a hit and burst into flames. Joe got out on the scene running from the carrier. That's definite. Nobody has any more news. His battalion had a very rough time and many were then taken prisoner. Another letter from, this was his serious major boss. He told me Joe was treated by a German medical officer a few minutes after the vehicle hit the mine. Hyde, together, went on to say that the German doctors treated them all very well. Joe was given morphine within a couple of minutes of the wound. Okay, the telegram, that's the telegram that you see in all the movies. But of course it's so uncertain. It always says missing presumed, as we said. We knew from the letters, there's Pike 16th of June, Burgess 22nd of June, Arnold 23rd of June. They're all still looking. They got the next official letter saying still, at least they say here, he is missing belief killed on the 7th of June, but there's still hope. There is still that belief. And I guess one of the issues is in this, how do you cope with that? How did my mother cope with that? 2 young kids, myself, Malcolm, handicapped son, and having to cope with this. Finally, on the 21st of August, from the Royal Army Medical Corps Guard, with every sympathy, I have to inform you that the captain died in my arms on June the 7th at about 6 o'clock in the evening. Everything that could be done was done, and he passed away very peacefully, and pain that he would have had was relieved by morphine injection. I can sure it came as a great shock to me. So we now think we know where it is. So we go up that D60 and it comes in a road that's now called the Avenue of the third Division of our 3rd Division. And we thought it's got to be around there. That's the Lubisi Woods. We knew that the vehicles were blown up coming up that road, and we knew he was sort of carried into the woods. So we decided this is it. So all the champagne, the Book of Sword, picked a poppy, and then we decided this is the spot. So at 6 o'clock on the 7th of June 2004, 60 years to the minute he died, we toasted it. I did apologise about the champagne. It was pretty shitty. what we but that you can see from Amanda's look in her eyes. It was good emotion. Okay, we nearly finished. We were nearly going to go home, but we knew there wasn't a grave, which was a shame. We'd like to go to the grave, so we thought, we'll find the grave. So we looked around and we found this incredible war cemetery. One of the things the British are quite remarkable at is the maintenance of the British graves around the world. They're absolutely immaculate. And this is one in the middle of Calvados. Here are the graves. Interestingly, the graves just here were Germans, so they buried them there together. And then as we looked along the grave things, it was almost impossible this would have been where he died. But we looked, and blimey, these three graves were Warwick officers, killed on the 30th of July, my birthday. And so we figured, well, he knew these guys, that's where we're going to say he was buried. So we had a picture of them. We bought a long standing camp. We put it there to us. This was Joe's grave. So we lit the candle. Rest in peace, Joe. That was it. It was a wonderful experience. It was really important for Amanda, myself, and Andrew. But I thought when I got back, this is an interesting story. I got to do a PowerPoint, as I do, and I thought, but the trouble is I didn't have any really good pictures of the beaches then. You saw the beaches I'd taken. So I thought what I'll do is I'll just go to Google. So I put into Google, Normandy D-Day sword, because I was convinced that was actually going to give me some good pictures, which I got, and you've seen some of them. They came from this Googling. There were 15,000 responses came up in Google in 15 seconds. In the top 10, there was one that caught my eye. Salvation Army mobile pantry into Aramax for D-Day anniversary. So, wow, interesting. Have a look at it. Veteran travels to Normandy with son and grandson. Graham Rogers, nearly 88, arrived on Sword Beach in the first wave on D-Day in 1944. He was a male nurse in the medical section and served in the 2nd Battalion, Warwickshire Regiment. He was one of only 2 people who were allowed to administer morphine to the injured soldiers, marking the required doses on their foreheads with a purple pencil. Well, you can sort of imagine when you read that, no, there's no way, there is no way. So I went back to the letter. Graham Rogers. G. Rogers. I thought, fucking me, it's him. So, what do? Go on to Google again and found the directory and look for G.P. Rogers in Chelmsford, because it said in the Salvation Army that's where he lived. And there it was. G.P. Rogers, Chelmsford. So I phoned him and I said, are you the person in whose arms Captain Lee died in Normandy? Yes. I thought, it was pretty emotional for both of us, so we didn't actually, at that stage, we said, look, I'll phone you. So I did my PowerPoint, sent him a copy of it, and phoned him. Because we had all these questions. What was a BLO? Did he hit a mine? Any other thoughts? So July the 11th, so we only just got back. Or July the 12th. I had a long talk with him. And it was like yesterday. His memory was just gobsmacking. Was it a mine? You can't do too much, it wasn't mine. And then we talked about it, and we had more information about which a lot of it's in that chapter they haven't spoken about how he was called prisoner, and the whole issue of when he was called to treat 28 warrocks that had been smashed in that raid, and one of them, of course, was my father. So he described in quite detail a lot of that stuff. And also he described that he died in my arms, and then Rogers asked the staff sergeant, who you'll learn about again later in that thing, said, "Lie him to lie under the tree." At the time this was happening, this was the evening of the 7th of June, Montgomery, his goal had been that the brigade got to Caen in one day. That was going to be the definitive thing in the whole land. Well, all they got to was the Lavisi Woods. They never got there. But he determined to blow the hell out of Caen because there were a lot of Germans there. And so at exactly the same time this was going on, there was this bombing thing. I want 1,000 Lancasters with 10 tons of bomb with every other gun turned in Caen. There were 16 cruisers and 26 destroyers, all blasting the shit out of Caen and destroyed it basically. And 7,800 died that night in Caen. So then, look, this was too good an opportunity. Amanda and Andrew were still they were still there. So go down and see him, you know, and take a thing and sort of get a recording of him so we can learn more.
Well, the bomb was in there, or I would be there. I wouldn't be like anybody else. But the whole pansy bit was going to be right there. But I dropped down calm, didn't they? And like that. But of course, all the fields on the left, that was where the dad was, you see. They'd mined it, and what he used to do,
His truck.
was a Tallarite. Right. 165 pounds of dynamite. Now I knew that because I was Redfield Ambulance, and I had to be out with it, like with Oxley. I had to go on a week's course at Ripon in Yorkshire for the Royal Engineers. And he said, always remember it, you will never forget about Tallarite. Think of the days of the year, 365 days a year, yeah? He said, you've got 365 pounds of gelotite there. And all that fields on the left were where I seen my dad in the morning at Blainville.
You'll never forget how many pounds of explosive there are in the cellar mine. Okay, so life moved on. But Marissa and myself went to London in 2005 to talk about Helicobacter, as I tended to do. And we thought, well, let's go see him. So on Remembrance Day, we saw him. And there is Lee, and he. There he was, resplendent, because it was Remembrance Day, so he was all geared up to go. So we took him to the local club. Andrew came, so here we are. Son, father, the guy in whose arms he died. So he was a lovely guy. That recording, by the way, goes on for about an hour and a half. There were so many things he was particular about. One of them, for example, just how superior the German weapons were to the British weapons, just how much better the guns were and all that sort of stuff. Okay, well that was sort of the end. I mean, I'd written the story and I thought, well, that's fine. It was made a pretty good story, I thought. Then 10 years later, I decided I'd write my memoirs. Now, obviously, what I had to do was update it. Well, I thought this has clearly got to be a chapter in my memoirs. So I thought, so back to Google, just to get a sense. And I found this website called World War II Talk with a discussion thread. This is the discussion thread, see? 2nd Battalion, Royal Warwick Regiment, 6th to 7th, 1944. This was it, this was the battle. So far, I've gathered a large amount of information literature. There was an incredible thread I found regarding a naval FO who was spotting for HMS Waterline who was sadly killed in action during an ambush as part of whatever. That's my father, as we ultimately know. So there's an amazing amount of stuff which suddenly made the whole story become clear of what was going on. But more importantly, there was another link to another discussion thread in that website. And look what the title of it is. Captain Jack Lee, 14th Regiment, Royal Artillery, D-Day +1. Can anyone help me find information on Captain Jack Lee, Royal Artillery, who died on Wednesday? He attended a manual school in Battersea between 1925 and 30. And here's a picture of him in his rowing act. There's a picture of my father in this website. Apparently there's the guy who did this was head of rowing now, and he wanted to get this information to row the book. And apparently there's an oar in the gym with my father's name on it. Apparently he's quite a good rower. So it's pretty amazing stuff. So now you see, we read all that stuff, all the differing bits of it, we can put together as a story. I won't do all of it, but I'll give you some idea of some of the bits. Firstly, it was an FOB, not a BLO. BLO did not mean Beach Landing Officer. BLO means Bombard Liaison Officer, and an FOP means Forward Observation Bombardment. So what the job was, and it was a volunteer job, basically the BLO stays on the boat, and in this case what's happened was that big cruiser called Warspite, and they get information from the FOB in terms of where the front line is. So when the cruiser are sending the bombs, they know where to drop them. So it's really, so they can drop it not on the troops, but as far as it is. And that's what his job was, and apparently it was remarkably dangerous. So he was number 81 FOB, number 83 FOB was Captain Burgess, who wrote that letter. And here is Captain Burgess with his team in FOB 83. And this is what it looks like. So in fact, it had all this stuff, because that's where all the communication, the maps and all those things were, where they communicated back to the boats. Rommel was there. Now I mentioned to you that the 21 Panzers was Rommel, so he was actually there. In fact, he was there before in the BC Wood. There's some debate about whether they were there on D-Day. They were there. They were in the Labisi Wood. I think there was 125 Panzers, tanks, Tiger tanks. And here he is. This is 1 week before for D-Day, inspecting the troops. So almost certainly this isn't the Labisi Wood. But his wife's birthday was on the 5th. So he went back to Berlin and wasn't there when D-Day happened, because he had to go to his wife's birthday. And when he came back, of course, it was all happening. And they were where they were in the BC Woods, which was 7 miles away from the coach. And he was really pissed off about that. Hitler wanted them there because it was his prime lot of tanks. If they'd have been on the beach, as Rommel wanted, D-Day would have been extremely different, but it wasn't. Another thing, I know now the people, one of the people in my father's vehicle was a guy called Danny Hyde, and this is stuff that he wrote. We entered the village, but to our surprise we met a veritable hail of fire from all sides. The adjutant's heart truck was knocked out by a shell from a Tiger tank, and we had no alternative to bypass it, get out of range to the tank. We managed to evade the back, load had been mined at this point, and we were unlucky in just striking. I was fortunate with a fraction lead, but I regret to say that Captain Lee and Rogerson, that's Jack Robertson, who was the driver of the vehicle, one of the naval ratings sustained injuries from which they died shortly afterwards. The other 2 ratings were taken prisoner, as he was, and marched away. That's their injuries. Captain Lee and Rogerson both had severe leg injuries. In the case of Captain Lee, his left leg was blown up below the knee. And Rogerson's legs were so severely blasted that they appeared to reduce to hanging together. We know that Joe got into the Levisi Woods with a doctor in Rogers. Rogerson was just left by the side of the road. They couldn't do anything with him, he was dead. How in fact how Joe got in is a real mystery, and there's a lot of debate on the website about that, because I told you he was seen blazing away at his brain drain, and then he ran into the woods. There was no way you could have ran into the woods in that situation. So it's quite amazing to see this debate going on this website about whether or not my dad was the one that ran into the What we also learned, and it's funny, I've just literally today when I was getting ready for this found a new book called The Cam Misadventure or whatever, and the whole thing was a total disaster. It should never have happened. Monty was convinced that the reality is that they could do it in one day, and if they did that, then it was just easy, everyone just moved through. No, they didn't know or they'd forgotten about the Panzer Division. This guy heard him, he decided he'd delay the attack by an hour. This was the attack of the infantry, and the idea was, of course, they'd be covered by the guns and stuff. But his message didn't get through to the infantry. So they went off without any cover at all, and those are the ones that got blasted to hell in that particular thing. And so at 9 o'clock in the morning, it was a slaughter. Okay, so now this is important. So it's now 4 o'clock, and this is where Alistair Bannerman in Support Company, they were ordered sacked, having told that the Levisi had been captured and was in the Warwick's hand. Well, it sure as hell wasn't. So that was as they drove up the D61. There were about 35 brain gun carriers coming across the road, but a motorcycle had an accident, and so there were only 5 that kept on going up the road, and they were the 5, and then of course they hit it. 4 of them were knocked out, including my father's, and one of them, that's Bannerman's, managed to go through, and he did something interesting. He spun his gun on his tank thing around and fired behind, and actually destroyed the Tiger tank that destroyed all the other things. But it didn't matter too much, because he in fact was also taken prisoner. And so according to Artie on the Whig Forum, all of this stuff was given by K.B. Smith, who was later sacked by Montgomery and sent to Africa. Okay, so what about Bannerman? There are indeed the 4 captains that we knew about. What about back to Google? So Alistair Bannerman, so I just put into Google Captain Alistair Bannerman. Bloody me. Alistair Bannerman died aged 94, and there are all these obituaries to him. Because in fact, he'd actually been an actor, and his wife had been an actor. And when they were captured prisoners, he actually got all the actors in the prisoner of war camp doing a school for scandal. so I thought, wow, that's pretty good. And then I saw this one. If I don't come home, letters from a D-Day captain. Look at this. This is a little book that says, if I don't come home, letters from D-Day. This was a letter equivalent to which my father had written to my mother. And he didn't come back. Alistair Bannerman did come back. So, and there was a ITV show on this particular story. So I got permission to get Alistair Bannerman's son and his phone number. So I phoned him and spoke to him. And here I am, one of the sons, talking with another of the sons. And he has 2 brothers. And I talked to the other 2 brothers. Another Helicobacter conference, went to London. Whoops. And there we are. The 2 sons. Andrew Bannerman, Adrian Lee, with their lovely wives. It was a wonderful, wonderful. We just got on so well. Then I thought, well, I was lucky with Bannerman. What about Waterworth? Oh, Google again. Peter Barney Waterworth, 1920 to 1990. 70. There he is. Royal Warwickshire Regiment, wounded in leg, recovered in hospital. And all of a sudden I got a LinkedIn page. And I won because I found in Google Captain Peter Barney Waterworth, missing, presumed dead, with a story saying, 61 years ago today, my dad landed at Normandy as part of D-Days. So I phoned him, he answered, and he did in Sydney. Nick, would you stand up? And there he is. I mean, it was just like, I just said to him, I just realised I never Googled Pike or Healy. I will now, and we might end up having all four of us. But that was pretty special. And even then, it's not over. I got another message from the World War website. Hi Adrian, I've just been reading your very moving, because I put the story on the thing, and sad account about your father, Joe Leith. My interest was caught because I was searching for sword-bleed stories about my uncle, Graham Rogers. It was my dad's. Somebody said to me that Graham had written this business about, he'd written this thing, and he said, yeah. And so remember this, okay, we know my father had died, we know he was laid under the tree, we know actually, we know that they then all went down to this incredible underground cave where they had 12 telephonists working on all the things and dealing all the Panzer things. And they were all down there. The four of us were taken to an underground tinker 18 steps down. It was a telephone exchange. There were 6 telephonists working there day and night. We were pushed to one side while the work went on, and then about 8 o'clock, Ronald appeared. An hour after my father had died, Ronald appeared. He completely lost his temper. He flailed. I've never seen such a fury. And wouldn't be surprised if I had a heart attack. He had insisted that when the Allies invaded, they were to be stopped on the beaches. But Rundstedt, the senior German officer, had planned to attack after we had advanced 7 miles. So I think we finished by going back to the letter. Darling Olive, if you read this letter, I've been reported and killed. I asked Reg to send it to you. There were just a few things that I couldn't put into an ordinary letter. Firstly, thank you for everything you've been, the most wonderful wife any man could ever have had. I can't imagine any way that we could have been happier, except to have been together more. You've been my inspiration all the time. You've had a lot of trouble with young Mal, and I hope that within a year or two he'll be pretty well up to hospital. I think that he will, and pray that he won't cause you too much trouble. Adrian will of course go from strength to strength. They're both good lads, and we should be proud of them. I've been terribly lucky to have found you out of all the world, and I've been so happy. Teach the boys not so much about church, but about God. At times like these and always, we need some extra support, and I pray that you'll get it. Let them like all the splendid things, birds and trees and sunsets and books and music and friendship. I loved all these things next to you, darling. Rachel will help you with any afters, and I know Olive will too only be afraid to ask them. As for me, you know, I'd sooner have been in the army than anywhere at the moment. And that I believe that we're on the right side. God knows we're stupid in England, but we're the right side in this war. So I can't grumble if anything happens, and I'll try not to. A love like ours doesn't just stop there. It isn't a single thing in the world that does. And I can only believe that we should be together again one day. So God bless you, dearest one, until we meet again. Wish you.